Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Rita.
Hello.
Welcome to Finland and the Nordic Culture Point. You're originally from Portugal, right?
Yes.
And you studied in England. As a matter of fact, we both studied together at the University of Surrey. We studied dance research at the University of Surrey. We studied more or less 30 years ago. Exactly now. I mean, it was probably September, but yeah, it's 30
Yeah.
years ago. So this is quite remarkable. Then you went to do your PhD at the University of Southampton, focusing on the experience of time and space
Yes.
in performance, bridging post-classic physics and art theory. So that was super sort of interdisciplinary, I would say. You taught about 3 years at University of Leeds, and consequently you went to teach at St. John University in York. Now you live with epilepsy, and in York you were working on a piece that dealt with that, and this piece was funded by the Arts Council of England, right?
Yeah.
And at St. John University, for some reason, that piece of you experiencing epilepsy was too much, too controversial, obviously. So you left, and interestingly, I would think that that was probably your sort of first engagement with sort of arts activism, as it dealt with human rights and freedom of expression, having the right to express your own experiences and sort of present your lived experiences with your chosen medium, which is dance. So once you left St. John University, you continued working as a freelance artist and established your company, Instant Dissidence. Can I just ask you, where did that name come from?
Well, it came from I was making a solo. I was still, so it was before moving to England. I was still at university in Portugal, in Lisbon, making a solo that I called Instant Dissidence ... just add water, and it was about identity and this idea that you can just like add water and create this like instant identity. And so when it came to coming up with a name for the company, I thought I want to make work that creates an impact in the world, and maybe it's at the edges of things, so I thought Instant Dissidence would be a good name. Yeah.
Yeah, that's how it goes. Brilliant. So then what happened in 2018? There was Brexit, and as part of Brexiters, you moved to Ireland.
Yeah.
And now you live in an eco village called Glockjordan.
Yeah.
This is an sort of, what do you call, intentional community. What does that mean?
So an intentional community, we come together to try and live in a way that is less harmful to the planet. So there's no harm, but that's our intention. And so we have a series of processes and ways of operating, from growing food to managing biodiversity-friendly street lighting to having small roads so that bikes are prioritized instead of cars. All sorts of things that we manage ourselves, so we're not managed by the council, we manage it ourselves. So it's a way of living in a more eco-friendly way, I suppose.
Yeah, so there is this sort of eco-sustainability already sort of in your environment where you're living, very much informing your sort of everyday life.
Yeah.
Right. So now, what brings you to the current residency at B28 in Sveaborg, and what drew you to this particular context?
So the residency here is, as Anki was saying at the beginning, is part of a project, Creative Europe project called Island Connect. And it's a project, an international exchange project where artists from different islands in Europe go and do a research in another island. And I have been playing with this idea of a project called SlowTides, which is a project that I want to develop with communities and artists from bodies of water in Europe, bodies of land in Europe surrounded by water. And so when Ireland Connect, when I saw the call, I thought this would be a great opportunity to develop the project. So here I am. The first residency was in Tenerife, where we all came together, all the artists from different countries in Europe, for 1 week of artistic exchange. Then I had a residency in Madeira, which is a Portuguese island off the coast of Africa. And now this is my second and final residency here at B28.
There are very different sizes of islands.
Yeah.
with Sveaborg, a tiny one, and then Ireland, or
Yeah.
Tenerife,
Yeah.
or Madeira,
Yeah.
very different sizes.
Yeah.
So about scalability there.
Mm.
So framing the theme, the title of this talk poses a provocative question: activist art or artistic activism? How do you personally interpret the difference or the overlap between these two concepts?
So this is a question that, so I make work that I sometimes call socially engaged choreographic practice, ecologically engaged choreographic practice, and then activism permeates those ideas. I want to make work that has an impact in the world, and if I'm lucky, and if I do it well, maybe it also changes the material conditions of the communities or the issues that I'm dealing with. And so the work that I make sometimes kind of spills into activism, and from activism sometimes work appears. So the question is, because I sometimes in my daily activity I am doing things that I kind of wonder, is this art anymore, or am I just being an activist? And so I have about 2 seconds of worrying about that. And then I go, oh well, I don't really, it's a thing that I'm doing, whether it's art or whether it's activism now, and it no longer holds an artistic value, I'm not sure, and maybe that's not for me to say. But I do ask myself that question.
So let's talk a little bit about your projects and relating to this sort of ecological sustainability. You have a project called SlowTides. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Its ecological focus, its approaches, and how it engages with activism through slowness and embodied practice.
So one of my approaches in terms of ecologically engaged work is that I'm interested in work that not only becomes a window into the topic, so a work which is about a particular issue in ecology, but also I also try and make work that the form of it or the way in which it happens embodies that. So it doesn't just talk about the thing, it shows the thing in the shape that it takes. So so in 2022, I had this question of how can I continue to be an artist that travels internationally, but without flying? What happens if I commit to never flying again, but I still want to work internationally? So in 2022, Perform Europe had a call for ideas that dealt with these questions, and I proposed to them this idea of slow-mo, which was my proposition was, okay, help me, fund me and my company to try and tour to 5 countries in Europe, but only on trains. And then the first question that came with that was, it's incredibly expensive. So I thought, okay, so let's allow the artistic methodology to change to account for that. So instead of a model where I was maybe spending 5 weeks creating a dance piece and then touring the dance for another 5 weeks on trains, what I did was I kind of collapsed the creative process into the travel process. And so we started on day 1 of travel from Ireland with no piece. We made it as we went along, and we performed it when we came to country 1, and then we did the same thing. So this is what I'm trying to say is that it makes sense when I say that I sometimes want the thing to have the shape of the thing that it's talking about. So it's an example of a different way of doing it. So when I finished slow-mo was all about trains. And then I became interested in what would happen if I focused on water. And so SlowTides is a similar concept I'm trying to develop, but about moving between different islands. And this time it's not about the train tracks, it's about the routes, the shipping routes.
Waterways.
The waterways.
So how do you, considering that you're doing dance and choreography,
Yeah.
and that takes space, how do you rehearse on trains?
Well, again, I'm allowing the material conditions of the project to change my expectations of how that should be done. So, for instance, on the boat to Madeira Island, there's actually not a passenger boat between Lisbon and Madeira, and so we got permission to go on a container ship, on a cargo ship, which was an incredible experience. At the same time, the captain said to us, you have your cabins, you have this little area outside your cabins, and you go nowhere else because this is not for passengers and it's dangerous. And so we had to adapt. And so we danced in a little space outdoors that we had, and we played with containment, for instance. So I'm allowing the conditions to dictate the process.
Yeah. So it's in a sense it's sort of a also a sort of a post-humanist approach where sort of inanimate objects have agency in a sense that they impact your decision making and your work rather than you being the active agent in determining what can be done. It's the whether it's a train or whether it's a ship.
Yeah.
And those conditions have a strong impact on your choices. So so in that sense there is this sort of a post-humanist undercurrency in that work, I would say.
And I would argue that they always do. It's just that the impact is somewhere else. So if I choose to go tour by flying, I may create a choreography that has lots of space because I've been in a studio and now I'm flying and then I'm in another studio. But some people sometimes talk about externalities, but the externalities are then placed on the planet and on the 80% more carbon emissions. So the impact is always there. It's just I'm choosing to, instead of the compromise being that and me having this choreography, I'm choosing to allow the choreography to be what it can be from within a context that is 80% less carbon emissions.
So in SlowTides, which builds on your earlier work, slow-mo, deepening the commitment to decarbonized touring and community-rooted artistic activities. This project engages with islander identities and socio-political realities across 4 European islands. Could you share how the embodied movement practices and site-specific choreographies in SlowTides are helping you to explore the relationships between geography, identity, and resilience, and how do the lived experiences of island communities shape the artistic and activist dimensions of your work?
Okay, so I think I will, if it's okay, I'll draw on the 2 very concrete examples. So what I did in Madeira and what I'm doing here. So in Madeira, my focus was on, so I'm interested in folk tales and folk dance as ways in which stories of islander identities are passed through time, but also are allowed to metamorphose and change through time. And so in Madeira, I worked with a group of folk dance from the island and embodied, so learned some of their movements and then explored the relationship between those traditional movements and my contemporary dance background. Here, what I've been doing is because it's such a great opportunity. Because in Suomenlinna, there's this dry dock. And so it's such a great opportunity to just actually focus on shipyards and shipbuilding and ship repairing. And so what I've done is I've got permission to kind of go down so there's no water at the moment. So you just see these huge ships, which is a perspective that as a human being you don't see because you're not under the sea. So I've gone down and improvised and made some films and photos around the relationship between my body and these parts of the ships that are usually underwater. And I'm going to be continuing that as well. So at the moment, because this is just R&D at the moment, what I'm doing is pulling these threads that SlowTides might then tie together into a clear concept. But at the moment, I'm just playing with ideas like that. So that's where the embodiment is coming.
So this is your research and development work.
Yeah,
Eventually
this is just
will be
eventually will be a work.
Yeah. But now you're collecting materials.
Yeah.
So to speak.
Yeah, and asking the question, what does this work want to be? Who does this work want to be, and how is it going to be? Because I don't know yet. So.
Okay. So let's talk a little bit about your very different type of work that you've been dealing with in work called Dancing with Strangers from Palestine to Ireland, and this work engages with anti-apartheid narratives. How did this project evolve, and what role does dance play in navigating such sort of politically charged terrain, so to speak?
So this project came about, again, if I can like direct our minds to the title of this artist talk as well, this link between art and activism. This project actually came from my activism. So I joined a group of dancers in Ireland. We made a decision that we wanted to respond to the call by our colleagues in Palestine to boycott, divest and sanction in the way that we can as artists. And so we were having meetings. We were having meetings about highlighting to certain organizations in Ireland that particular artist is directly funded by the state of Israel, for instance, etc. And one of our Palestinian colleagues, dancer, actually during that meeting said, this is great and this is one of the things that we should be doing, but is there a way that we could not just boycott certain voices, but could we amplify Palestinian voices somehow? So do it from the positive rather than merely the negative. And at that point, it occurred to me, I'd created this concept of the body avatar back in 2012, where, and the idea is very simple, it's this idea that if there's a community or a human being which for some reason, either because they're in a refugee camp, they're in prison, they are in a care home, and they've lost the ability to be present in the artistic realm, here for instance, or in a theater or in a gallery. If they can't be present and they want to tell their story and they want to perform, they want to share their movements, then my body could become an avatar for them. And so I created this idea called Dancing with Strangers. So when we were doing the activism and my colleague asked that question, is there something else we could do? I just said, well, actually, I did this thing some years ago. There have been a few iterations of it. Body avatars, could we do that? And then my other colleague, Rima, immediately said, well, yes, and I could put you in touch with 4 dancers in Gaza tomorrow, and you can ask them. And so 2 days later, I was on a WhatsApp call with dancers in Gaza, and I posed the question to them. And they said, their saying to me was, we have been offered, we have been given many offers of help, but no one has come to us in a way that asks of our artistry as part of a project that would also raise awareness and also potentially raise donations. So the fact that you are saying, let's do it as artists, yes, that's definitely something that we want to do. And so that's it. So they then, with my choreographic guidance created four of them. They created 4 dances that I then embody every time I perform, and 4 sets of audio stories as well. So just very simply, the way the performance works is I stand somewhere, usually on the streets, like this. I have a T-shirt that says "Dance with me." When people come over to me, often people are a bit like, are you trying to sell me something? What's this about? And then I say, no. Like, if you agree to dance with me, you will actually end up dancing with one of 4 Gazan dancers. They are our colleagues. They can't be present, and so I'll be a body avatar for them. So if you agree to dance with me, you choose who you want to dance with from the 4 of them. I give you the headphones, and in English they'll start talking to you, and then you just copy the dance. And then I pull one of 4 dances from my bodily memory, and I do it. We stand face to face, and the dance is then transmitted through my body avatar to this person. And then there's a second way of communicating back, where with the audience members' permission, we film them doing the dance, and then we upload it onto an Instagram account that the Gazan dancers check, and they see, and they've seen since we started over a year ago, the solidarity of people all over the world now who have danced with them. So that's kind of the gist of the project.
Sounds very sort of complex, and it requires lots of logistics, lots of courage also, not just from you to be out on the streets or market squares or any sort of public space, inviting people to join in one by one, but also lots of courage from these people to actually join you and engage in dance they know nothing about. So that's very brave.
I can be quite persuasive.
That we know. Would this be a right time to take a little bit, take a look at that film of Dancing with Strangers, a 5-minute film, to see what's it really about?
Yeah, and before we do, can I just say, so as we were doing the performances, Gavin Fitzgerald, the director of the film, he's a film director based in Ireland, he got in touch and he said, actually, I would like to also donate my artistry to create a short documentary film of what you're doing to amplify its impact. And so Gavin and his team created this film. So, yeah.
Oh, let's take a look at that. So this piece, Dancing with Strangers, draws attention to the lived experiences of Palestinians and the broader struggle against apartheid. Considering the recent reports from human rights organizations and international experts describing the situation in Gaza as genocidal, marked by mass displacement, destruction of infrastructure, and the use of starvation of every normal people, children, as a weapon. How are you personally and artistically experiencing this moment? Has the evolving situation influenced your thinking, your practice, or the way audiences engage with your work?
So how have I experienced it? So we started this project in February 2024. So it's now over a year ago. And from a personal point of view, I have experienced just a change in energy. There was obviously an energy there at the beginning. There's no longer there, due to the lack of food and also just the constant trauma. So from them, so I've seen a huge change as well in their physical appearance, and then their conditions have changed. They have been displaced many times since we first spoke to them, moved from one area to another. Their family members and friends have died, have been killed, and I have permission from him to say this to you today. One of the dancers who was injured by Israel was about 2 weeks ago evacuated to France, and he is now recovering in France. He's had a couple of operations, and they're hoping they can save his leg. He's a dancer, so you know, this is the other side of what's going around this work, and these changes that have happened since. And this dancer, his name, all the dancers are in the project with pseudonyms, but because this dancer is now in safety, he's given me permission to reveal. His name is Bashar Belbezi, is the artistic director of a very, very well-known Dabka dance troupe called Forsan.
I mean, this very, very heavy, very sort of a heavy emotional load also, I mean, obviously for them, but also for you. We didn't discuss this earlier, but I was just wondering, how do you protect yourself? You know, just that you don't burn yourself out in working with these incredibly difficult.
Yeah. So I have my moments. So there's two things to say about that. So myself as a body avatar, and also the other dancers that my company employs, because it's not, you saw in the film, it's not just me, to become body avatars. I didn't really understand this until I was talking to a psychologist, but basically, apparently what we're doing is embodying trauma and passing it on. And whereas if I pass it on to you, you get that experience at that point in time, we're doing it over and over and over and over and over again. And so after a while, I came to understand that I needed to get some help. So for a time, I had some counseling just in terms of being able to manage it. I mean, nothing that I will experience will be even like at 1% of what they're experiencing. So I don't want to really concern myself with my feelings. However, I know that if I'm not in the right place to do the job, I have a job to do. That's how I see it. If I can't do it, then I'm not doing them the justice. And so I have to be okay in order to do the work. And that's how I see it.
So there is the importance of care of the self. In order to be able to do your work and in order to help them.
Because every time you become a body avatar for a person who agrees to dance with you, then at that point in time, my role is to hold space for that person that I have in front of me, because they will also be hearing these stories. They have all sorts of, in the moment, emotions, and I have to be able to be with them, to go slower sometimes, to stop sometimes if it's too emotional for them. And so I can't be present for another if I'm not able to do that, if I'm concerning myself with my feelings. So I also do this exercise where I kind of just say to myself before each performance, and now, Rita, you're going to take your emotional self, you're going to park it, put it on the shelf, do the performance, and then at the end, grab it back, and I often have a little cry for a day after each performance, and then I'm back.
How about artistic freedom? I mean, there is especially in sort of in modernity and the modernist notion of art and the artist, there is a strong emphasis on artistic freedom. Do you ever feel tension between artistic freedom and activist messaging, and how would you negotiate that in your work?
Okay, so there's a couple of things to say on that. One is that I'm in an incredibly privileged position, that I'm a sole trader. Like even, you could say that I direct instant distance, but the instant distance is me and whoever I'm able to employ for a particular project when I get funding. So I can pretty much say or do whatever I want. However, what's happened with certain kind of works, what's been happening is that I've noticed that they've begun to be funded more by civil society organizations rather than arts organizations. And again, that's kind of it sometimes, I mean, you were mentioning at the beginning my epilepsy work. Sometimes arts organizations have particular fears around particular kinds of activism. And so, and civil society organizations, if they've been set up to do exactly that kind of activism, they're looking for vehicles. So the funding, the way I get funding is shifted somehow, but it doesn't curtail my artistic freedom in that way. I just, instead of going there, now I go here. Yeah, does that?
Yeah, no, that makes sense. In my recent book, Creativity, Society and the Role of Socially Engaged Art in Higher Art Education, I sort of explore how socially engaged art represents a certain sort of paradigm shift, a social turn, you would say, where that also sort of reconfigures or re-articulates the artist's role, challenging the more traditional notions of artists' autonomy, and with that traditional notion I refer to the concept of free artist embedded in the Renaissance idea of the artist as a genius with sort of unique inborn creativity, and the sort of a liberal humanist view of the self as a self-contained entity and as the origin of meaning. And my experience is that these ideas are still relatively prevalent in the arts and also in higher arts education, demanding that true artists to devote themselves to art making free from any restraints of society and without compromises. So of course these are not God-given truths, but they are historically constructed ideals from a particular point in Western history. Nevertheless, these liberal humanist views continue to underpin the modernist view of the artist, although it has been contested by post-structuralism, social constructionism, analytical philosophy, and some forms of feminism for more than half a century. So building on what you just shared, do you feel that the very concept of artistic freedom and artistic autonomy are being redefined in socially engaged contexts like where you work?
So I think that in relation to socially engaged arts, I think that the ecosystem of arts is one where there is a place for everything. I sometimes love buying a ticket to the theatre, going to see a dance performance, which is purely about the choreographic structures and the virtuosity of the dancers. It's a thing that gives me pleasure, particularly being a trained dancer, it gives me pleasure to do. Is it where I locate myself as an artist? No. But you're right in that in my arts education, I also got that message from universities and for my training, that the point of me being an artist was going to be to find my own choreographic voice, my own choreographic signature. And for a while I tried to do that. And it just wasn't, it didn't sit right with me. It wasn't meaningful. It's just not my path. And once I found socially engaged practice and arts and activism, it almost is like it flows with me. I almost, and to go back to this concept of the artist, does the idea come from the artist, etc. There's a beautiful, so I don't know how Finnish language is organized in terms of grammar, but in Irish, the sentence construction is beautiful in the way that things pass through you rather than you being them. So for instance, when you say I'm sad, if you say it in English, you and sadness have just become one. You are sadness and sadness is you at that point. So there's this confluence between the identity and the doing that's happening. Whereas in Irish, you would say tabrom orum, which means that sadness is passing through you. And I often feel that my relationship between myself, whoever Rita is, and the artwork is a little bit like that. It's passing, I happen to catch it, and I'm a vehicle for it being in the world. It doesn't come from me. And like what I said about where this work came from, we were just having a conversation. Somebody mentions that, somebody mentions, I say, I have this idea, I'll put you in touch. It was a thing that was as a possibility in the air, and we all grabbed it and made it happen. So I don't subscribe to the idea that there's this artist called Rita that comes up with these ideas.
It's very much like the origin of the word inspiration, where inspirare, breathing in the divine sort of light. There it comes, the inspiration, it goes through, and if you don't grasp it at the right moment, it's gone.
Yeah.
And so therefore you have to seize the moment and grasp it. It's not in you, but it comes from somewhere.
And it could have been somebody else, because these things exist as possibilities in particular times and spaces and circumstances. They're all there, and it could have been somebody else. It just happened to have been me.
Yes, so. Yes. Brilliant. So ethical considerations, if you think of your work, what ethical questions arise when working with politically sensitive or ecologically urgent topics, and how do you ensure sort of a respectful, ethically considerate representation in your work?
So one of the questions I always have is, if I'm working with a particular community and it's their stories, then my first question is, they're the ones who should be on stage to present their stories. That's the first thing. Now, sometimes that representation isn't possible, in like the case of this work, hence the avatars. Sometimes it's not ideal because of security considerations, safety, etc. But ideally, that would be the way that I would work. And then another ethical consideration is is in terms of labor. So one of the things that I wanted to do with this work was, from the beginning, deal with it as a funded piece of artistic work rather than a fundraising project. And that meant that the first thing that I did after having this conversation with them on WhatsApp was that I called everybody I knew, I emailed everybody I knew, and I said, you have to fund me to do this. Which the response was, oh, the call doesn't open until 2 months from now. There's no time 2 months from now. You have to fund me now to do it, because I want to be able to pay them in Gaza exactly the same as the avatars are being paid in Ireland. So anyway, I was persistent, and I found a couple of organizations and trusts and foundations who gave me the money to get started. And then, as the lead of the project, another ethical decision that I made for myself was that I wasn't going to benefit financially from this project. It doesn't feel right. I don't want to. Now, everybody else is paid. Everybody else is contracted as artists, the Gazan dancers, the other avatars, the filmmaker. Everybody else is paid. I'm not paid. And it's the activism that I can do in relation to Palestine. So that's kind of an ethical decision. So for instance, the fee from being here doing this artist talk is going directly to the Gazan dancers. So, and if any of you want to donate at the end, that goes directly to them as well. So again, around the financial side, I had to really think about how to do this project in a way that honors their artistry as well as anyone else's artist. Oh, and one more thing. So in the way that we work is that with them is that they created the dances, and they get paid an intellectual property fee for instant distance to do 4 performances of their work. After 4 performances, I have to go and raise more funds to pay them a second intellectual property fee. So they are constantly being paid for the dances and the work that they created. So we really make sure that it's not exploitative in any way. So.
That's very considerate. That's very considerate, and it's sort of your pro bono contribution in this particular project. So you obviously have to carefully select which of these projects are pro bono, because obviously you do need to make a living as well in this real world.
Yes.
So So about audience engagement, how do you think audiences perceive activist art differently from more traditional performances? And do you aim to in your work, do you aim to provoke or educate or incite action?
Well, do you remember at the beginning when I was talking about it's a window into the thing, so it's showing the thing. So one of the things that I try to do is to raise awareness, talking about ecological travel, talking about carbon emissions, or whatever it is that the work is about. But I also think that the other way that audiences engage is that, because a lot of us, if you can't imagine a different way of doing something, you're not going to do it. And so this is why what I try to do is to do an example of, okay, so I'm doing this tour on trains, and we did it. I'm doing this tour all on boats, and we did it. And so what I see is the people then going, well, if Rita can travel from Ireland to Cyprus by train and a few boats, then maybe I could also do that. And so it becomes, and since 2022, where instant distance was practically one of very, very few companies doing this, now slow travel is much more common, and people are doing a lot more common than it was then. And so I think sometimes audiences notice the form of it, and it's a thing that they can take on in their daily lives as well. So I aim to raise awareness, but also to be an example of a different way of doing it that other people can try to.
If you think of sort of personal stakes, how would you say, how has your identity, whether cultural, political, artistic, how has your personal identity influenced the activist dimensions of your work? Or maybe the other way around, how has the activist dimension of your work influenced your identity as an artist or as Rita in your private life?
So I think that my identity like I wouldn't be doing this work if I wasn't me. And by that I mean I am Portuguese, so I grew up and I was educated from within the country that benefited from slavery, benefited from colonialism, from occupation of many other countries. White middle-class woman, educated to PhD level, and then lived for another 20 years, so for 20 so years in Portugal, for 20 so years in the UK, another country that did exactly the same thing. And so I suppose this didn't just happen straight away, but it eventually dawned on me that there is nothing, it dawned on me that I have all this privilege. And that's why, many ways, you're there and I'm talking to you. It's because I come from this privileged background. And so once I saw that, I couldn't unsee it. And so I asked myself the question, what do I do about this? Do I undo myself in ways that I never could, because I am who I am? Or do I use this privilege to allow for opportunities of other people whose bodies can't be seen, can't be felt, or whose voices can't be heard? Do I create those platforms for others? And so that's absolutely the reason why I'm doing the work that I'm doing. It's bound up with this awareness of nothing that I do has to do with meritocracy. More of it than not has to do with the privilege that I happen to have been born in. And so acknowledging that, and then making the decision about how do I do that, because I could just be using it to add to my own cultural capital, and but I can't. I can't do that because I can't unsee. I can't unsee what I see.
No, obviously, so, once you are involved, you're involved.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And I don't want to. Yeah.
What about institutional support? What kinds of support or resistance, maybe, have you encountered from arts institutions when presenting activist work? Obviously, you mentioned the St. John University and their resistance, but more recently. And support, perhaps.
Yeah, so more recently, particularly in relation to the Palestine work, as you can imagine, there have been instances where the institution wants to present the work. But so my contract, again, with the Gazan Dancers is one where they don't want their work to be utilized in order for any institution to feel better, unless they are structurally questioning the ways in which they may or may not be complicit in occupation and genocide. And so sometimes it does happen that we're talking to a particular organization, they want to present a work, but they don't want, for instance, to sign up to an apartheid-free zone clause or something that's in the contract. At that point, I don't present the work. And there have been organizations in the arts who, at that point, would just say, okay, cut, that's it. But there have been others that stay engaged, because I always want to stay engaged. I want to stay, but can we have a conversation about why you can't? And so, for instance, I'm having a conversation with this particular very well-known arts institution in this particular country, where they actually invited me to have a discussion with their board, and they explained to me how structurally, the way that they're set up, the laws of the country and how they have to abide those laws mean that they actually can't. Now, that they want to, and so they've stayed engaged with me, and we are talking about finding ways of going around things. Because I suppose one of the things that all of us citizens at this point have to make decisions about is when our countries and our governments aren't abiding by the international law, and therefore the structures that we work from within are also not, because they can't, because they have to match the law of the country, right? If the law of the country is not abiding by international laws, so what do you do? So we all have to make these decisions. Do we continue to operate from within these structures and then implicitly contribute to, or do we position ourselves outside, or do we go around certain corners and try and do what we can from, and in a way like subvert them from the inside, which is also a possibility. So I really love it when there's this moment with an organization that is like a conflict or a point of resistance, but if they stay engaged, then I continue working with them. And this is one of those things where I kind of go, am I doing art anymore? Probably not. But it feels like a thing that I have to do, so I keep doing it. Yeah.
A colleague of mine, emeritus professor Alan Owens from Chester University, he described, and I actually wrote about it in my book, he described about his sort of extensive project in Palestine. They had been collaborating with Palestinians for many years, and there was very fruitful collaboration, arts-based work and educational programs. And he was asked to write about the project in his university's newsletter, and he did write about it, but the administrators insisted to edit the text, removing any references to occupation, any references to problems and issues, eventually censoring his text. So he just pulled his text out, and we were talking about this, and you know, wondering whether one of the reasons for this is that universities, neoliberal universities, are increasingly externally funded with business partners, and so there is this threat for many institutions to not to sort of make their business partners upset, and this was probably the reason why they started sort of censoring his otherwise very sort of straightforward and serious text. Have you encountered anything like this?
No, I mean, in a way, it's because I'm a free agent in the world of the arts. I'm not connected to any organization. The censorship, in a way, happens with the not platforming the work. So if people find that what I'm presenting is too controversial, they just won't program or they won't fund. And so so I had relationships with arts organizations in Europe that have now ended because of that. But I mean, in a way, so I won't be edited. So you either program it and platform it as it is, or you don't. But if you don't, there's many other organizations who do.
Exactly.
So it doesn't really, and the structure of instant distance is basically me and one other director. So
it's easy for you to negotiate with yourself.
I negotiate with myself, yeah. So I don't have those issues.
Yeah, that's really,
and that's, in a way, it's a privilege of being the sole trader,
Yes.
which, you know, as much as I sometimes criticize and push my dance colleagues who are in academia or in other organizations, you could do more, I also understand that they're bound in a way that I'm not. But we can work together to find ways, yeah.
How about Nordic and Irish perspectives? How do you see artistic activism operating in Ireland versus Finland or other Nordic contexts from your experience?
So I don't know much about the context of art and activism.
What is your experience from your sort of first expression?
Well, I suppose I'll talk about Ireland first, and in saying this, I have to say, like, I'm an immigrant in Ireland. So, like, I'm a Portuguese immigrant in Ireland. So I'm also still learning. I've only been there for 7 years. But being in Ireland has enabled me to see the world in a different way. So if you imagine Portugal, colonial country, in UK, colonial country, and then I go to Ireland, which is a country highly aware of colonization, highly aware of occupation from the British, and also very, very tuned into all the tactics of occupation, including famine, and so being in Ireland, one of the things that I'm learning from people in Ireland is to lift the veil on all those things and see them for what they are. And for instance, and now linking in these two works that we've been talking about, linking in socially engaged practice and ecologically engaged practice, one of the things, for instance, that I attended a talk around the relationship between ecology colonialism and the erasure of the Irish language by the British. And one of the most interesting things is this idea that when you have folk tales in your own language that talk about a particular mountain and a particular river, and maybe the mountain was once a giant who, I don't know, all these folk tales that exist in Irish, you can't really occupy the land because the land is intertwined with the people, with their stories. And so the tactics apparently from the British was first make the language illegal. Make the language illegal so you then remove the memory of these stories in their own language. And they remove people's connection to land and territory. And then once you've objectified the mountain, it's no longer the giant. It's now a piece of real estate that you can buy and sell and occupy. You can take it. And people also won't resist as much. You've broken the connection between the people and their stories and the collective memory and the land. And this is, again, a link to ecology as well. The reason why we are in this mess that we're in today is because we have lost this connection between ourselves and nature. Like, we don't even sometimes understand that we're nature. Like, this is nature. Never mind. So to me, all these things are intertwined, and I'm still learning, but Ireland is really teaching me about the relationship between these concepts because they're so aware of them. Yeah.
I think you're saying something very important there about sort of local culture and local narratives, their importance. I mean, obviously, Finland, the independence of Finland is very much built on our sort of recognizing the Finnish culture as distinct from Russian culture and distinct from the Swedish culture, and that sort of gave us the position to fight for our independence, and this is something that our current Minister of Finances should also understand more clearly, that culture is not just a cherry on top of a cake that Finland cannot afford, according to her, but it is actually the very roots of our independence and also the very foundations that we have a reason to fight for this country. And if that's taken away from us, it is, as what you said, it's just real estate that can be bought. Yeah. So that's very, very important. Very important. How about the futures of future directions? How do you see the future of artistic activism, the futures of socially engaged art, more generally, and in your own work? Are there sort of emerging forms or platforms you're genuinely excited about?
I mean, in my work, I'm just going to continue to do what I'm doing. But what I'm really excited about is that in in music, in pop rock music, actually, I see an energy and an activism that I don't often see in dance and theatre and other art forms. I see bands making songs about what's happening in the world. I see them not choosing not to perform at certain festivals if they're funded, if they're complicit in what's happening. And I see them organizing in a way. And I suppose because these bands are quite big names and they're known all over the world, they're having a huge impact. Maybe I'm being too not understanding enough of how tiny dance is in the world. But I would love for us dance artists, visual artists, theatre artists to organize in this way as well, and to see a lot more work out there that's actively engaging with the world. Like Nina Simone, one of my favorite ever phrases from her is to make work is to reflect the times, to be an artist, to reflect the times. And then she goes on to say, I don't know what you think your role is, artist, if you don't think that is it. And so I would love to kind of be part of a wider community of artists who are just doing that a little bit more, even if that means that they have to give something, they have to give up on something, or not have something, or not perform at a particular festival. I think it's important to say no sometimes. So, yeah.
Saying no can be very strong.
Yeah.
It sends a message. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Good. Well, thank you, Rita. Now I would like to open the discussion and invite our audiences to join the conversation. Does anyone have any thoughts on how activism has shaped either their own artistic practice or?
Do you feel, Rita, that your work reaches enough people, audiences?
That's a good question.
It does from within the scale that I work at. So I work in like small scale dance performance, live art performance. So it's never going to reach enough people in terms of, I'm not one of these choreographers who works at the big scale or is kind of associate artist of whatever. So it's never going to do that. So it reaches the amount that I can. But I also think there's something precious about that, because I think sometimes when people, particularly when people do this one-on-one dance with me, they have this 10 minutes, it's so tiny, it's just me and this person for 10 minutes. But then it becomes really precious as well, and really valued for the time and space that it happens in. So for instance, once somebody said to me, why don't you contract body avatars all over the world, and then we can do it all over the world at the same time? And somehow I think that takes from this kind of intimacy that I don't want to let go of.
I understand that. When I was watching that film clip, I thought that would be a perfect example of, for example, showing on BBC, in the BBC art sections. It would reach a lot of people, and it would be very, very inspirational.
Thank you. Well, if you've got any contacts with the BBC,
or
I don't know.
Or with Yle for that matter.
I don't know how they would feel about my contractual clause on apartheid-free zones, but anyway, yeah. I mean, of course, and the film is, as you can see, got a few awards as well from festivals in Lebanon, and a human rights award from a festival in Ireland as well. So it's doing the rounds in film festivals.
Yes, but the more TV screens it reaches,
yeah,
the better the exposure.
Thank you.
The better the effect.
Definitely.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, also indirectly, your work is being disseminated through articles and books, and
Yes.
and so
Including your book.
including my book. You are one of the case studies. So there will be sort of internationally, globally, art students reading about your work eventually, when the book reaches the libraries and reading lists. So yeah, you'll be there. More questions, please. Yes, and then.
I was just thinking because you mentioned how Ireland has more awareness about political happenings because they can see the patterns. If you have recognized any different kinds of amounts of activism in, for example, Ireland versus the UK versus Finland, for example, because different countries are dependent on their history in different ways. I know, for example, Finland, who has had also a history of colonization. I moved here 3 days ago, so I'm not very
Welcome.
thank you. But I'm from Sweden, and I know, because I am half Finnish, I know about the Finnish history versus the Swedish history, and from my experience, I have seen that it seems like Finland, because of their past, are more engaged politically and about activist and social issues. If you see that when you travel, that it's like a noticeable change.
Yes, I think it's no secret, for instance, in relation to Palestine, that Ireland is very open and politically as well very active. What I think it happens in certain countries is that the policies, the laws the governments are passing are creating a climate of fear. So it's not so much that there is a directive saying you shall not make artwork about this, but it's clear that it's tricky. And so in certain countries, to make work about certain issues, or to even go on a demo, or to even have 2 particular words on a t-shirt, could put you in jail for 14 years, 2 words. So this climate of curtailing freedom of expression, of course, has an impact. And so I think that, yes, and I don't think it's a coincidence that countries that have been colonized in the past are the most outspoken countries about what's happening in the world right now. It's because, exactly like you say, there's an awareness and they can see the strategies. They were applied in their own countries, to their own bodies. They can spot them a mile off. So, yeah.
Thank you.
You had a question.
Thank you for a very interesting talk. Do you have experienced any kind of anxieties from funders of your project? Funders who think this is too difficult, this is very difficult to fund because of? Have you had any kind of anxieties, or have you ever thought yourself that maybe you should be a less activistic here because of funding, or any reflections on that?
So I'll start with the second part of your question. No. So I won't compromise. If I think a particular work has to say a particular thing because it's what it needs to be, then it's what it needs to be, and I'm not going to edit it. Now, of course, that means that I won't get certain funding. And I know that I've gone for funding for works about particular issues, and I didn't get it because of the country that those monies were coming from, for instance. But again, the fact that then there are then civil society organizations that have been set up to fund, to raise awareness of particular issues. And I'll give you an example. For instance, the Irish Network Against Racism. The Irish Network Against Racism funds workshops, awareness raising sessions on racism in Ireland. They're not set up to fund arts projects, but when I approach them, they see this as a vehicle for that. And so, you know, I think when I encounter that problem, I then find a way by going to the institutions in society that actually want to tackle that issue. And I have been very, very grateful that they have funded the work, even though they don't often fund arts projects. So I go around it like this.
So it's a question of how to frame your work in different contexts.
Yeah.
And how to present it.
Yeah. Although I often just go, I want to do this project. Yeah. But then they see that it's about a particular thing.
Yeah. Being bold, that's good.
Yeah.
Here's a question.
To begin with, I must tell you that I am apolitical. I was a police officer in London in the 1970s and 80s, and I went to the scene of several bombs left lying around by the Republicans, and I had colleagues and friends, and I also dealt with members of the public who were killed as a result of those bombs. Do you feel that your work is sufficiently impartial, or do you recognize that there are two sides to every political argument?
That's a good question.
Are there two sides to every political argument? There are two sides to every political argument, and sometimes those two sides are, there's an oppressor and an oppressed. Now, I don't claim to understand all different oppressor conflicts in the world. What I am concerned with at this point in time is ideas of ownership and oppression. That be it, for instance, the idea that we as humans can own land or can own the planet Earth and can do with it as we wish, and exploit it and extract from it as we wish. I think those are the issues that concern me. And I often see these two sides, the oppressed and the oppressor. Thank you.
More questions? Yes, please.
Here online, we have one short question that is it possible to share your video art?
Do they mean this?
I'm not sure if that's the question, but maybe the video you had there, so I'm...
So in relation
that's
to the
that
video
one.
that was live streamed now, hope that person was able to see it. Now I know that this artist talk will exist on the website. Because we haven't launched this particular film from Palestine, Dancing with Strangers from Palestine to Ireland, we haven't created the online launch. It will be for now edited out of the artist talk, but then it will be available shortly when we do the online launch. So I hope that that's the answer to the person.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And there is your other work available online as well, isn't there?
Oh yeah,
Video.
yeah. And yeah, there's lots of other work. And you can follow me on Instagram. There's lots of little videos there.
Yeah, good. Great. Any more questions? There is a question, yes.
Hey there. Yeah, my question really just stems toward grassroots. Because as you mentioned, a lot of activists, they've grown up maybe in those particular regions that they have direct experience of that. Would it make sense to actually, get some of these resources and aim that to schools to actually get the grassroots to actually potentially, give rise to the activists of the future?
Do you mean the some of this work being shown in
absolutely.
schools?
Yeah, I see this would
Yeah.
be brilliant, to appeal to the younger audience who may not have full appreciation of what's actually going on.
Yeah, I mean, I would be very, very happy to do that. So, and I think that would be a really worthwhile thing to do. So, if you know of any schools interested.
No, I mean, funnily enough, my experience of being in Finland is that I think the youth here really do understand what's going on in the world, compared to other countries. Like the UK, it probably wouldn't figure in their list of priorities, but here it seems a little bit more different. And probably Ireland is a great example of that as well. They really preserve that. Thank you.
But that's actually a very good suggestion for a future project that could be sort of set up for producing educational material for schools on activism, engaging students into activist mindset and thinking from different perspectives. This would be a wonderful, wonderful project. And engaging BBC, for example, in producing that, or Yle for that matter, would be truly fantastic.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, I think so, definitely.
something to consider.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, do we have more questions? If not, I have a question for all of you. What is it that you wish to take home from this conversation today? If you take a moment just to think of that, one thing that you wish to take home with you from this conversation. You don't have to share it with us, but just for yourself. Good. Thank you, Rita.
Thank you,
It's been
Kai.
wonderful. It's been a very good conversation. I really enjoyed it. Thank you for being here. Thank you for our audiences. Thank you for all good questions. Thank you for our online participants, wherever you are. And see you the next time, whenever that is.
Thank you, Kai, and to all of you.